Sometimes the worst sound in the world isn't screaming, it's silence inside a church built for a wedding that will never happen. The orchestra stopped playing at exactly 11:42 a.m. Rain hammered against the stained glass windows of St. Mark's Cathedral, while 200 guests sat frozen beneath golden chandeliers waiting for a billionaire groom who would never arrive. Clara Whitmore stood alone at the altar in a custom white silk gown worth more than most people's monthly rent, one trembling hand resting protectively over her 7-month pregnant belly while whispers spread through the pews like smoke. Something was wrong. Everyone could feel it. The florist avoided eye contact. The wedding coordinator kept checking her phone every 10 seconds. Even the pastor looked nervous now, loosening his collar beneath the heavy church lights. Then Clara's phone vibrated. One message. 3 words. He chose her. Clara stared at the screen as the blood drained from her face. Around her, cameras from invited society bloggers began flashing instantly. Ethan Blackwell was America's golden billionaire. CEO of Blackwell Capital. 38 years old. Worth nearly $3 billion. And today was supposed to be the wedding event of the year. Instead, breaking news alerts exploded across social media before Clara could even breathe. Billionaire Ethan Blackwell secretly marries banking heiress in private ceremony. Someone gasped behind her. Another guest whispered, "Oh my God, she didn't know." Clara felt the room tilt sideways. The baby kicked hard beneath her ribs as thunder cracked outside the cathedral windows. Her bouquet slipped from her fingers first. Then her knees. Ethan had promised her forever. Promised their son would grow up surrounded by love instead of the cold power games he survived as a child. Clara still remembered the night he held her hand on the balcony of his Manhattan penthouse while snow drifted over Central Park below them. "You and this baby," he whispered back then, pressing his forehead against hers, "are the only real things in my life." But billionaires didn't belong to themselves. Not really. 3 weeks earlier, Blackwell Capital had quietly begun collapsing behind closed doors. Investors were pulling out. Debt was swallowing the company whole. And somewhere inside those polished boardrooms filled with old money and colder hearts, Ethan's mother made a decision. Clara Whitmore had to disappear. The pregnant fiancée from a middle-class family could not save the empire. But Victoria Ashford could. Daughter of a banking dynasty. Heiress to billions. The perfect merger disguised as a marriage. Clara never saw it coming. She only noticed Ethan becoming distant. Fewer calls. Shorter kisses. Meetings running later into the night. Then yesterday morning he told her everything was fine while adjusting the cufflinks she bought him for Christmas. 12 hours later, he married another woman behind closed doors while Clara stood inside a cathedral waiting to become his wife. The church doors suddenly opened as reporters rushed in from the rain outside shouting questions over each other. "Clara, did Ethan Blackwell abandon you? Is the baby his? Did he leave you for Victoria Ashford?" The flashes became blinding. White light after white light exploding across her tear-filled eyes. And then, through the chaos, Clara heard something that changed everything forever. A quiet voice near the back pew whispered, "She has no idea why he really left." Clara turned slowly toward the voice near the back pew, her vision blurred by camera flashes and tears she refused to let fall in front of strangers. A woman in a dark emerald coat stood half-hidden beneath the cathedral balcony, speaking quietly into her phone before disappearing into the crowd. Clara never saw her face clearly. But the words echoed inside her chest like a warning bell. "She has no idea why he really left." Outside, rain poured across Manhattan in silver sheets while reporters crowded the cathedral stairs waiting for the fallen bride to appear. Inside, the orchestra packed away violins in uncomfortable silence. Guests who had spent weeks bragging about invitations to the Blackwell wedding now avoided looking at Clara altogether, as if humiliation itself might be contagious. 1 hour ago she was about to become Mrs. Ethan Blackwell. Now she was trending online beside headlines calling her America's most publicly abandoned woman. Clara lowered herself carefully onto the front pew, one hand pressed against her stomach as her son shifted restlessly beneath the silk fabric of her dress. The baby always reacted when she was anxious. Thunder rolled overhead again. Somewhere behind her, someone whispered, "Did you hear he married Victoria Ashford at the courthouse this morning?" Another voice answered, "The Ashfords just injected $600 million into Blackwell Capital yesterday." Clara closed her eyes. Suddenly the missing pieces began sliding together in the worst possible way. Ethan's late-night meetings. The tension in his jaw. The way he stopped talking about the nursery they planned for the baby. 3 months ago she had walked into his office carrying ultrasound photos while executives fell silent the second she entered the room. Ethan smiled that day, but not with his eyes. She remembered it now. God, she remembered everything now. Her phone vibrated again. This time it was Ethan calling. Clara stared at his name glowing across the screen while her heartbeat pounded in her ears. Around her, reporters outside were already chanting her name loud enough to echo through the cathedral doors. "Clara! Clara!" She answered anyway. Silence met her first. Then Ethan's breathing. Heavy. Uneven. "Clara," he finally said quietly. Hearing his voice shattered something inside her. "Do not say my name like nothing happened." Another long silence followed. Somewhere in the background she could hear people talking rapidly, car doors slamming, the distant chaos of a financial world spinning out of control. Ethan sounded exhausted. Older somehow. "I tried to stop this." Clara laughed once, sharp and hollow. "You married another woman this morning. You do not understand." "Then explain it to me." Ethan inhaled slowly. "If I did not marry Victoria today, the company would collapse by Monday morning." Clara felt cold spread through her body despite the heavy church lights overhead. "So you traded us?" "It was not supposed to happen like this." "But it did." Her voice cracked for the first time. "Our son is due in 9 weeks, Ethan." On the other end of the line, she heard him exhale shakily. For one dangerous second, Clara almost believed he was hurting too. Then another voice entered the background. Female. Elegant. Calm. "Ethan, the press is waiting." Victoria Ashford. Clara closed her eyes immediately. There it was. The sound of the future replacing her in real time. Ethan lowered his voice again. "I will take care of you financially." Clara's eyes opened slowly. "Financially?" she whispered. "That is what you think this was?" "Clara, you promised me a family." Her hand tightened protectively over her stomach. "You stood in our apartment 3 nights ago and painted stars on our baby's nursery ceiling." Ethan said nothing. The silence became unbearable. Then Clara heard something else through the phone. A television nearby. Breaking news anchors discussing Blackwell Capital's emergency merger with the Ashford banking empire. Words like rescue package and strategic marriage floated through the static. Strategic marriage. Clara nearly stopped breathing. She was never Ethan's equal in that world. She had been the soft part of his life. The peaceful part. The woman who made pancakes on Sunday mornings while he answered billion-dollar calls barefoot in their kitchen. But peace had no value inside collapsing empires. "Did your mother choose her?" Clara asked quietly. Ethan did not answer fast enough. That was answer enough. Clara nodded slowly to herself as understanding settled over her like snowfall. She was not abandoned because Ethan stopped loving her. She was abandoned because powerful families protected money before people. And somewhere inside that terrifying realization was an even darker truth. Ethan sounded afraid. Truly afraid. "Clara, listen to me carefully," he said suddenly, his voice dropping lower. "You need to leave Manhattan tonight." Her heartbeat skipped. "What?" "Please. Just trust me this one last time." "Why?" Another pause. Then Ethan whispered words that made the blood drain from her face completely. "Because after what happened this morning, there are people who do not want this baby connected to me anymore." The cathedral suddenly felt too small for air. Clara tightened her grip on the wooden pew as Ethan's words echoed through her mind again and again. "There are people who do not want this baby connected to me anymore." Outside, Reporters continued shouting beneath the rain, while camera flashes lit the stained glass windows like lightning. Clara lowered her voice to barely a whisper. "What does that mean, Ethan?" For the first time since she met him, the powerful billionaire who controlled boardrooms with a single sentence sounded genuinely helpless. "It means things became dangerous after the merger agreement was signed this morning." Clara stood slowly, her wedding dress heavy against the marble floor. "Dangerous for who?" Ethan did not answer immediately. Somewhere behind him men were arguing loudly. She recognized one voice instantly. Margaret Blackwell. Ethan's mother never raised her voice in public, but Clara had learned long ago that quiet people could still control entire rooms. "You need to stop calling her," Margaret snapped in the background. "The situation is already unstable enough." Clara's stomach tightened. Ethan lowered his voice further. "Listen carefully. A driver is waiting outside the cathedral right now. Black SUV. His name is Daniel. He will take you wherever you want to go." Clara looked toward the cathedral doors where silhouettes moved behind the rain-soaked glass. "Why are you helping me if you chose them?" That question lingered painfully between them. Finally Ethan spoke so quietly she almost missed it. "Because choosing them was the biggest mistake of my life." Then the line disconnected. Clara stared at her phone in silence while thunder rolled over Manhattan again. Somewhere in the distance church bells began ringing noon across the city. 12 slow chimes. 12 reminders that less than 24 hours ago she still believed in forever. A wedding coordinator approached carefully holding Clara's white coat. Her mascara had smeared slightly from stress. "Miss Whitmore," she said gently, "the reporters outside are getting aggressive. Security recommends leaving through the back entrance." Clara nodded numbly. As she stood, another sharp kick came from inside her belly. Her son. Still there. Still depending on her. That tiny movement steadied her more than anything else had all morning. Clara placed both hands protectively over her stomach and inhaled slowly. She could fall apart later. Not now. Not while another life depended on her staying upright. The back hallway of St. Mark's Cathedral felt strangely cold and quiet compared to the chaos outside. Her heels clicked softly against polished stone floors while staff members avoided eye contact. Halfway down the corridor Clara noticed framed wedding photographs hanging along the walls. Smiling couples. Veils. Rings. First kisses beneath cathedral lights. She stopped walking for just 1 second. 7 months pregnant. Abandoned hours before becoming a wife. The humiliation hit harder there than it had in front of cameras. Not because Ethan married another woman, but because some part of Clara still loved him enough to understand why he did it. And she hated herself for that. "Miss Whitmore?" the coordinator whispered nervously. "This way." The rear cathedral doors opened into a narrow alley where cold rain fell in silver sheets between Manhattan skyscrapers. A black SUV waited exactly where Ethan promised. Headlights glowing softly through the storm. A tall man stepped out holding an umbrella. Mid-40s. Dark coat. Calm eyes. "Daniel," he said simply. Clara hesitated near the steps. Her instincts suddenly screamed at her to run. Everything felt wrong now. Every shadow. Every stranger. Every black car in the city. Daniel noticed immediately. "Mr. Blackwell asked me to give you this first." He reached slowly into his coat pocket and handed her a folded envelope. Clara recognized Ethan's handwriting instantly. Her hands trembled as she opened it beneath the rain. One sentence. "Trust nobody connected to my family." Clara's heartbeat quickened. Then another line underneath. "I am sorry for destroying us." A lump formed painfully in her throat. Daniel opened the SUV door carefully. "Ma'am, we should leave before the press circles around the block." Clara climbed inside without another word. The leather seats smelled faintly like cedar and expensive cologne. Warm air wrapped around her cold skin while rain streaked across the tinted windows. As the SUV pulled away from St. Mark's Cathedral, Clara watched photographers running toward the wrong side of the building, still searching for the crying bride they expected to capture on camera. But Clara was no longer crying. She was thinking. Thinking about Ethan's fear. About Margaret Blackwell's voice. About billion-dollar mergers arranged like royal marriages. And about the strange sentence hidden inside Ethan's warning. Trust nobody connected to my family. The city blurred outside the windows as Daniel drove downtown through heavy rain. Finally, Clara spoke quietly from the back seat. "Where are we going?" Daniel checked the rearview mirror once. "Actually, ma'am," he said carefully, "Mr. Blackwell told me to let you decide that." Clara looked down at her engagement ring still shining beneath the soft interior lights. 3 carats. Flawless diamond. Ethan spent 6 months designing it himself because he once told her ordinary rings felt meaningless for extraordinary love. Slowly, Clara pulled the ring from her finger. Her hand shook harder than before. Then she placed it gently beside her on the leather seat. Daniel glanced at it briefly in the mirror but said nothing. Clara stared out at Manhattan disappearing behind sheets of rain and finally whispered words she never imagined saying. "Take me somewhere Ethan Blackwell will never find me." Rain followed them out of Manhattan like a shadow that refused to let go. Clara sat curled against the back seat window of the SUV, while city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white across the wet highway. Every few minutes her phone vibrated again with calls she refused to answer. Friends. Reporters. Unknown numbers. At one point Ethan called 3 times in a row. Clara stared at his name lighting up the screen until it finally disappeared into silence. Daniel kept both hands steady on the wheel, saying almost nothing as they crossed the George Washington Bridge and headed north through dark stretches of interstate lined with pine trees and truck stops glowing beneath neon signs. Clara had never felt farther from her old life. 3 hours ago, she was standing beneath cathedral chandeliers preparing to marry one of the richest men in America. Now she was wrapped in a borrowed blanket inside a moving SUV headed toward nowhere with a child kicking beneath her ribs and no idea who she could trust anymore. Somewhere after midnight her stomach tightened sharply. Clara inhaled through her teeth and pressed a hand against her belly. Daniel noticed instantly in the mirror. "Are you all right?" "I think so." Another wave rolled through her lower back. Not pain exactly. Pressure. The kind her doctor warned could happen if stress became too severe during the 3rd trimester. Clara closed her eyes briefly. "How far are we from the city?" "About 80 miles. Thunder rumbled overhead again. The storm had followed them all the way into upstate New York now, turning the highway slick and almost empty except for 18-wheelers roaring through the rain. Clara looked down at her phone again. 37 missed calls. Social media notifications exploded faster than she could clear them. Videos of her collapsing outside St. Mark's Cathedral already had millions of views online. One headline made her stomach sink completely. Billionaire wedding scandal connected to Blackwell Capital collapse rumors. Another. Mystery surrounding pregnant ex-fiancée deepens after disappearance. Disappearance. Clara almost laughed at the word. As if she had become some tragic celebrity mystery instead of a woman trying desperately to survive one catastrophic day. Then her phone buzzed again. This time with a text from an unknown number. "Get out of the SUV." Clara froze instantly. Another message appeared seconds later. "Daniel works for Margaret Blackwell." Her blood ran cold. Slowly Clara lifted her eyes toward the rearview mirror. Daniel still drove calmly through the storm, expression unreadable beneath the soft dashboard lights. Had Ethan lied? Or was someone trying to scare her? Before she could think clearly, another sharp tightening hit her stomach, stronger this time. Clara gripped the leather seat. "Daniel!" He glanced back immediately. "What is it?" "I think something is wrong." The baby shifted hard beneath her ribs as pain spread low across her abdomen. Daniel's face tightened with concern. "How far along are you?" 31 weeks. He cursed quietly under his breath for the first time all night and reached for his phone. "There is a small town about 10 miles ahead. We can stop at the hospital there." Clara looked down at the text messages again. Get out of the SUV. Do not trust him. Fear crawled slowly up her spine. Her breathing quickened. Daniel, she whispered carefully. Who exactly do you work for? He hesitated just long enough to terrify her. Mr. Blackwell hired me 5 years ago. Clara's pulse pounded harder. And his mother? She pays everyone eventually. That answer hit like ice water. Clara's hand moved instinctively over her stomach. Daniel saw the panic in her eyes immediately. Listen to me, he said firmly. If I wanted to hurt you, I would not still be driving north in the middle of a thunderstorm looking for a hospital. Another contraction interrupted before Clara could respond. Stronger now. Real enough to steal her breath for several seconds. Rain hammered harder across the windshield while the SUV suddenly slowed near a blinking exit sign leading toward a small mountain town buried in darkness. Daniel turned off the highway onto a narrow road lined with old motels and gas stations glowing faintly through the storm. Then the SUV sputtered once. Twice. Clara looked up instantly. What was that? Daniel frowned at the dashboard. No. No, no, no. The engine coughed violently before the SUV rolled to a stop beside an empty roadside motel with a flickering vacancy sign buzzing red against the rain. Daniel tried the ignition again. Nothing. Perfect timing, he muttered bitterly. Another sharp pain hit Clara hard enough this time that she gasped aloud. Panic flashed across Daniel's face as he looked outside toward the nearly deserted road. The motel office still had lights on. Everything else around them looked dead asleep beneath the storm. Daniel grabbed an umbrella quickly and rushed around to Clara's side. The cold rain hit instantly as he helped her out of the SUV. Clara nearly stumbled when another contraction tightened through her stomach. Easy, Daniel said carefully. We just need to get you inside. Lightning flashed overhead as they hurried toward the motel office through puddles reflecting red neon light. Clara could barely breathe now between fear, exhaustion, and the terrifying realization that her entire future had collapsed in less than 1 day. Then the motel office door opened before they reached it. A tall man stepped outside beneath the neon glow wearing a dark flannel shirt with rolled sleeves and calm gray eyes that instantly locked onto Clara's terrified face. He looked around 35. Strong build. Quiet presence. The kind of man who noticed everything without speaking much. His eyes dropped briefly to Clara's pregnant stomach before returning to Daniel. Looks like you two picked a bad night to break down, he said evenly. Then he looked directly at Clara again and added something that made her heartbeat stop for one impossible second. Mrs. Blackwell, right? The rain seemed to stop for one strange second after the man said her name. Clara stood frozen beneath the buzzing red motel sign while cold water dripped from her hair onto the soaked silk of her ruined wedding dress. Daniel's shoulders tightened instantly beside her. How do you know who she is? The man glanced once toward the stalled SUV before answering calmly. Because the entire country knows who she is tonight. His voice was steady. Deep. The kind of voice that made panic slow down instead of spread. Another contraction rolled through Clara hard enough to steal her breath. She grabbed the metal railing beside the motel office steps while the baby shifted sharply beneath her ribs. The stranger noticed immediately. She needs to sit down. Daniel stepped forward protectively. We are trying to get her to a hospital. The man looked toward the empty road disappearing into darkness beyond the rain. Closest hospital is 30 miles east and half the mountain roads are flooding already. Lightning flashed overhead as if proving his point. Then he opened the motel office door wider. Warm light spilled across the wet pavement. Come inside before she collapses out here. Clara hesitated only a second before another wave of pain forced her forward. The motel office smelled like cedarwood and coffee. Old country music played softly from a radio near the counter while rain hammered against the windows hard enough to rattle the glass. It felt unreal compared to the marble cathedrals and luxury penthouses she had lived inside for the past 3 years. Simpler. Safer somehow. The man grabbed a clean towel from behind the desk and handed it to Clara carefully. Sit. She lowered herself slowly into an old leather chair near a small fireplace while Daniel paced near the entrance making frustrated calls about the broken SUV. No signal. No tow trucks. No hospital transport available until morning because of the storm. Perfect. Clara closed her eyes briefly and pressed both hands against her stomach. The baby moved again beneath her palms. Still fighting. Still there. First babies? The stranger asked quietly while setting a mug of warm tea in front of her. Clara looked up slowly. Yes. He nodded once as if that explained something important. Storm stress can trigger contractions early sometimes. Clara studied him carefully now beneath the warm motel lights. Mid-30s maybe. Dark blonde hair slightly damp from the rain. Broad shoulders. Wedding ring absent. Calm eyes that missed nothing. Not handsome in the polished billionaire way Ethan was. Different. Realist somehow. Like someone who fixed problems with his hands instead of lawyers. You still have not told me your name, Clara said softly. Noah. He extended his hand slightly. Noah Hayes. The name meant nothing to her. But Daniel reacted instantly. Clara noticed the subtle shift in his expression before he hit it again. Noah noticed too. Something wrong? Daniel cleared his throat quickly. No. But Clara could feel tension building silently between them now. Noah leaned casually against the front desk, arms folded. Your driver seems nervous. Daniel answered before Clara could speak. I am responsible for her safety. Noah's eyes moved briefly toward Clara's stomach. Then you are doing a poor job parking broken SUVs in the middle of a storm. For the first time all night Clara almost smiled. Almost. Another sharp pain. Interrupted before she could. Stronger again. She inhaled carefully while Noah crouched beside her chair immediately, all traces of humor disappearing from his face. How far apart? Maybe 15 minutes. Noah looked toward the old wall clock above the reception desk. And how long has that been happening? About an hour. He nodded once, thinking quickly. You are probably not in labor yet, but stress is pushing your body too hard. Clara laughed weakly under her breath. Stress seems to follow me lately. Noah studied her quietly for 1 second too long. Not pity. Not curiosity. Something else. Recognition, maybe? Like he understood more than she realized. Outside, thunder cracked so loudly the lights flickered once across the motel office. Daniel finally lowered his phone with frustration. No service anywhere. We are stuck until morning. Clara stared down at the untouched tea in her hands. Morning felt impossible right now. Everything did. Her old life already felt like a dream collapsing farther away by the hour. Ethan. The cathedral. The cameras. The ring still sitting abandoned in the SUV. Then another thought hit her suddenly. Clara looked up sharply at Daniel. My apartment. He frowned slightly. What about it? All my things are there. Daniel's silence answered too much. Clara's heartbeat quickened. Daniel. He exhaled heavily before speaking. Miss Whitmore. Blackwell Security cleared the penthouse this afternoon. Clara felt the air leave her lungs completely. Cleared? Mrs. Blackwell requested all personal items removed before the press arrived. Mrs. Blackwell. Not Clara anymore. Victoria. The replacement already moving into her life before the wedding flowers were even dead. Noah watched her expression carefully from across the room. Clara stared into the fireplace flames while humiliation burned hotter than the storm outside. Every trace of her existence had already been erased from Ethan's world in less than 12 hours. Her clothes. Her photographs. Her nursery plans. Gone. Tears finally blurred her vision despite how hard she fought them back. I do not even have a home anymore, she whispered. Silence filled the motel office for several long seconds except for rain and crackling firewood. Then Noah spoke quietly. You can stay here tonight. Clara looked up slowly. I cannot pay you. I did not ask you to. Daniel immediately stepped forward. That is not necessary. I can keep driving once the weather eases. Noah's expression remained calm. In this storm? With her condition? Another flash of lightning illuminated the room. Daniel said nothing. Because he knew Noah was right. Clara suddenly felt exhausted beyond words. Exhausted from fear. From betrayal. From pretending she could survive this night alone. Noah reached behind the desk and placed an old brass room key gently beside her tea. Room 12. Get some sleep, Clara, he said softly. The world can fall apart tomorrow. Room 12 smelled faintly like pine cleaner and old books. Clara stood silently near the doorway while rain tapped against the motel window beside a flickering neon sign outside. The room was small. One queen bed. A wooden dresser with chipped corners. A lamp casting soft amber light across faded wallpaper. Nothing like the luxury penthouses and private resorts she had spent years pretending made her happy. Yet somehow this tiny motel room felt safer than the marble tower she once called home. Clara slowly lowered herself onto the edge of the bed, exhaustion pressing against her bones like wet concrete. Her wedding dress spread around her in wrinkled white folds that no longer looked bridal under motel lighting. It looked abandoned. Forgotten. Like a costume from someone else's ruined life. Another kick came from inside her stomach. Clara placed both hands over her belly immediately. It is okay, she whispered softly. I am still here. The baby moved again beneath her palms as if answering. For a moment, silence filled the room except for the storm outside. Then 3 soft knocks tapped against the door. Clara stiffened instantly. Fear had become automatic now. Slowly she stood and opened the door a few inches. Noah stood there holding a tray with soup, crackers, and a fresh towel draped over one arm. Steam curled upward from the bowl between them. You did not eat anything earlier, he said simply. Clara stared at the tray for one awkward second before stepping aside. You really do not have to keep helping me. Noah entered quietly and placed the tray on the small table near the window. Maybe not, he replied calmly. But you look like someone who forgot what taking care of herself feels like. Clara almost answered defensively before realizing he was right. She could not remember the last full meal she ate. The last peaceful night she slept. The last day she spent without adjusting herself around Ethan's world and Ethan's problems and Ethan's impossible expectations. Noah stepped back toward the door respectfully, keeping distance that somehow made her trust him more instead of less. Try to sleep. Stress is not good for either of you. Clara hesitated before speaking again. How did you know my name earlier? Noah paused near the doorway. Television. Clara frowned slightly. That fast? This country turns rich people's disasters into entertainment within minutes. His tone carried no judgment. Just fact. Clara looked down at the untouched soup. And now I am one of the disasters. Noah studied her quietly for a second. No. You are just the woman people decided to blame for someone else's choices. The words hit harder than she expected. Because nobody had said anything kind to her all day. Not since before the cathedral. Noah gave a small nod toward the food. Eat while it is warm. Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. Clara sat by the window afterward holding the hot bowl between trembling hands while rain streamed endlessly down the glass. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled low through the mountains. She forced herself to take small bites even though her stomach remained twisted with anxiety. Halfway through the meal her phone lit up again. Ethan. Clara stared at the screen for a long time before finally answering. Where are you? His voice sounded sharper now. More urgent than before. Clara looked instinctively toward the rain outside. Somewhere safe. Ethan exhaled heavily. Daniel stopped answering me an hour ago. Clara hesitated. The car broke down. Silence. Then another strange sound in the background. Raised voices. A door slamming. Ethan lowered his voice immediately afterward. Listen to me carefully. If anyone asks about the baby, you do not confirm anything. Clara blinked in confusion. What are you talking about? The merger agreement included family succession clauses. English, Ethan. Another pause. If something happens to me, our son becomes legally connected to Blackwell assets. Clara felt cold spread through her chest again. You think your own family would come after a baby? Ethan did not answer directly, which terrified her more than if he had said yes. Clara stood slowly from the chair and walked toward the motel window. Outside, she could barely make out Noah crossing the parking lot through the storm, carrying tools toward the stalled SUV. Calm. Focused. Real. Everything Ethan no longer sounded like. Why are you warning me now? Clara asked quietly. Ethan's breathing became uneven again. Because I thought marrying Victoria would stop this. Stop what? Then she heard it. A woman's voice shouting faintly somewhere near Ethan. Angry. Sharp. Not Victoria. Margaret Blackwell. You already signed the agreement. Margaret snapped in the distance. This conversation is finished. Clara's heartbeat quickened instantly. Ethan spoke faster now. There are financial investigations happening inside the company. People are panicking. If the board believes there is another heir connected to me outside the Ashford marriage, things become complicated. Clara stared into the rain, while her free hand instinctively covered her stomach again. Another heir. Not another child. That was how these people thought. Like bloodlines were business contracts instead of human lives. You should have chosen us, she whispered. Ethan went silent. Long enough for Clara to know he agreed. Finally he said something so quietly it almost disappeared beneath the static of the storm. I think about that every second. Tears burned behind Clara's eyes again, but this time they felt different. Less heartbreak. More exhaustion. Do not call me tonight, Ethan. Clara, you already married someone else. Her voice cracked softly. You do not get to sound jealous because another man offered me soup in a motel room. Silence exploded through the line. Then Ethan asked carefully, What man? Clara looked outside again toward Noah standing in the rain repairing the SUV beneath flickering neon light. For the first time all day, she suddenly realized something strange. Noah never once asked her for details about Ethan. Never once acted impressed by the Blackwell name. And somehow that felt more dangerous than curiosity. Because powerful people were usually the only ones not intimidated by other powerful people. Before Clara could answer, lightning flashed bright enough to illuminate the entire parking lot. In that white burst of light she saw something impossible parked behind the motel garage across the road. A private helicopter with silver initials painted along the side. Clara stopped breathing for a second as lightning faded across the parking lot. The helicopter sat half hidden behind the motel garage, sleek silver beneath the rain with the initials NH painted along the side in dark charcoal lettering. Not rented. Owned. Expensive enough that only someone with serious money could keep it parked in the middle of nowhere during a thunderstorm. Her eyes slowly shifted back toward Noah standing beside the broken SUV with rain soaking through his flannel shirt, while he tightened something beneath the hood like an ordinary mechanic. Nothing about him fit together anymore. The calm motel owner. The old pickup truck parked outside. The private helicopter hidden behind the building. Ethan's voice suddenly returned sharply through the phone. Clara? She blinked hard. I have to go. Wait. His tone tightened instantly. Who is there with you? Clara looked outside again. Noah slammed the hood shut and wiped rainwater from his face before speaking quietly to Daniel near the motel sign. Daniel looked uncomfortable. Nervous almost. Like a man standing too close to information he should not know. Just someone helping. Clara answered carefully. Ethan became silent for 2 dangerous seconds. What is his name? Another flash of lightning illuminated the parking lot. Noah turned slightly toward the motel office windows at the exact moment Clara whispered, Noah Hayes. The reaction on the other end of the phone was immediate. Sharp breathing. Then complete silence. Clara frowned. Ethan? When he finally spoke again, his voice sounded colder than she had ever heard it before. You need to leave there immediately. Fear prickled down Clara's spine. Why? Because Noah Hayes is not some motel owner. Clara's grip tightened around the phone. Outside, Noah laughed quietly at something Daniel said before glancing briefly toward her window again. Calm. Controlled. Completely unaware she was learning about him in real time. Then who is he? Ethan exhaled slowly. 7 years ago Noah Hayes almost destroyed my company. Clara blinked in confusion. What? He owns Hayes Aeronautics. Her mind struggled to catch up. Hayes Aeronautics. One of the largest private aviation companies in America. Military contracts. Luxury aircraft. Billions in federal deals. Clara remembered seeing the name on financial news channels before. Quiet empire. Ruthless growth. Extremely private owner nobody ever photographed. Ethan's voice lowered further. Noah and I were supposed to merge companies years ago. Then my board forced him out during negotiations. Clara stared through the rain toward Noah again. You mean Ethan Blackwell betrayed him too? Silence. That silence answered enough. Clara, Ethan said carefully now, if no one knows who you are, this situation becomes complicated. Why? Because Noah Hayes hates my family. The storm outside seemed louder suddenly. Clara's heartbeat quickened while pieces began sliding together in terrifying ways. Daniel recognizing the name earlier. Noah never reacting to Blackwell headlines. The helicopter. The strange calm confidence beneath his quiet personality. Ethan spoke again before she could answer. You do not understand what men like Noah do when they see weakness in competitors. Clara almost laughed at the hypocrisy. Men like Noah? She whispered. You married another woman this morning to save your empire. Ethan inhaled sharply but said nothing. Because there was nothing left to defend. Clara looked again through the rain-covered glass toward Noah helping Daniel secure a tarp over the SUV engine. No. Expensive watch. No bodyguards. No performance. Just competence. Real quiet competence. It unsettled her more than arrogance would have. He does not seem dangerous, Clara admitted softly. Ethan answered immediately. That is exactly why he is. Before Clara could respond, another contraction tightened painfully through her stomach. Strong enough this time that she doubled forward against the motel wall with a gasp. The phone nearly slipped from her hand. Outside, Noah noticed instantly through the window. Within seconds the motel office door opened and cold rain swept briefly into the room as Noah crossed toward her fast. What happened? Clara struggled to breathe evenly. Ethan's voice still echoed faintly through the phone's speaker. Clara? Clara! Noah looked down at the phone in her shaking hand and his expression changed immediately. Not surprise. Recognition. Blackwell, he said quietly. Clara looked up sharply. Noah gently took the phone from her trembling fingers before she could react. She needs rest, Noah said calmly into the receiver. Silence answered first. Then Ethan's colder voice. Stay away from her. Noah's eyes never left Clara as another wave of pain slowly eased from her body. Interesting request, he replied evenly. Considering you abandoned her in a cathedral 12 hours ago. Clara watched the tension harden across Noah's jaw beneath the soft motel lights. Not emotional. Controlled. Like a man carefully deciding how much anger to reveal. Ethan's voice sharpened through the speaker. You do not know anything about this situation. Noah gave a faint humorless smile. I know enough. Then something shifted in his expression. Subtle. Dangerous. I also know your mother has been making calls all night trying to locate her. Clara's blood ran cold instantly. Ethan went silent. Noah continued quietly. That usually means people are scared. Outside thunder cracked violently overhead as rain battered the motel windows hard enough to shake the glass. Clara stared between the phone and Noah while fear twisted slowly through her chest. Because for the first time since the cathedral, she realized something terrifying. Ethan was not the most powerful man in this story anymore. Noah finally handed the phone back gently. You should rest. Clara hesitated before taking it. Ethan's voice returned low and urgent. Clara, listen to me carefully. If Noah Hayes is involved now, nothing about this becomes simple anymore. Clara looked up at Noah standing only a few feet away beneath warm amber light, while storm shadows flickered across the motel walls behind him. Then she asked the question neither man wanted her to ask. What exactly happened between you two 7 years ago? The question hung in the motel office heavier than the storm outside. Noah looked at Clara for a long moment before answering while rain hammered the windows behind him like impatient fingers. Ethan stayed silent on the phone now, listening. Waiting. Noah finally leaned one hand against the reception desk and spoke quietly. 7 years ago, Blackwell Capital needed military contracts to survive. Clara watched his expression carefully. Calm on the surface. But something colder moved underneath. My company developed navigation systems for private aircraft and emergency rescue helicopters. We were smaller back then. Independent. Ethan's breathing sharpened faintly through the phone's speaker. Noah continued anyway. Blackwell approached us with a merger offer. Clara frowned slightly. And you refused? Noah gave a humorless smile. No. I trusted them. The room felt quiet except for thunder rolling low through the mountains. Noah's eyes shifted briefly toward the storm outside as if remembering something he spent years trying to bury. 3 weeks before contracts were finalized, confidential designs from my company leaked publicly. Clara's stomach tightened instinctively. Someone framed you. Noah looked back at her slowly. Someone destroyed everything I built. Ethan finally spoke through the phone, voice colder now. You still cannot prove that had anything to do with me. Noah laughed once under his breath. Not amused. Interesting choice of words, Blackwell. Clara looked between them while pieces clicked together faster now. What happened after the leak? Noah answered without taking his eyes off the phone in her hand. Investors disappeared overnight. Government contracts froze. Half my employees lost their jobs within a month. His voice never rose. Somehow that made it worse. Then Blackwell Capital quietly acquired my remaining patents for pennies through shell companies. Clara's chest tightened painfully. Ethan said nothing. Because silence was confession enough again. Noah crossed toward the motel window and stared out at the storm. I spent years rebuilding from nothing while your future husband became America's financial golden boy. Clara lowered her eyes immediately at the words future husband. Even now, hearing Ethan connected to her like that hurt more than she wanted to admit. Noah turned back toward her after a moment. Then tonight I turned on the television and saw Blackwell standing at another wedding while his pregnant fiancée collapsed outside a cathedral. Ethan interrupted sharply. You do not understand why I did what I did. Noah's jaw tightened slightly. No. I understand perfectly. Clara suddenly realized something terrifying then. Both men understood sacrifice. But only one of them had sacrificed someone else to save himself. Another contraction rolled painfully through her stomach before she could speak. She gripped the edge of the chair and inhaled sharply. Noah crossed the room immediately while Ethan's voice burst through the phone at the same time. Clara? I am okay, she whispered, though she clearly was not. Noah crouched carefully beside her. The contractions are getting closer. Clara nodded weakly. 10 minutes maybe. Noah glanced toward Daniel standing near the motel entrance. Call the county clinic again. Daniel checked his phone immediately. Still no service. Perfect. Lightning flashed across the parking lot bright enough to turn the motel windows white for half a second. Clara suddenly felt very far from Manhattan. Very far from hospitals and penthouses and everything familiar. Fear crept slowly back into her chest. What if something happens to the baby? Noah answered calmly before panic could fully rise. Then we handle it. Simple words. Steady words. Clara realized Ethan never sounded like that during crises. Ethan. Controlled outcomes with money and lawyers and negotiations. Noah sounded like someone who physically stayed when things became difficult. The difference unsettled her deeply. Her phone buzzed again with another incoming call from a blocked number. Then another. Then another immediately afterward. Daniel's expression darkened near the doorway. They found the motel. Clara's pulse jumped. Who? Daniel hesitated. Blackwell's security teams are tracking the SUV registration. Ethan cursed quietly through the phone. You need to leave now. Noah stood slowly beside Clara, expression unreadable. In this weather she is not going anywhere. Ethan's voice hardened instantly. You think this is about weather? Clara looked up sharply. Ethan. He lowered his voice again. My mother is trying to contain damage from the merger. If investors learn there is another child connected to me outside the Ashford marriage. He stopped himself too late. Clara stared at the phone in disbelief. Another child. The words hit harder now. Clinical. Financial. Like her son existed only as a threat to contracts and inheritance documents. Noah heard it too. Clara saw something dangerous shift behind his eyes then. Not anger exactly. Disgust. You really are your mother's son after all, Noah said quietly. Ethan snapped back immediately. You do not know anything about my family. Noah took one slow step closer to the phone. I know a scared man when I hear one. Silence exploded across the line. Then Ethan said something that made the entire room freeze. If Margaret reaches Clara first, she will make this disappear quietly. Clara's blood turned cold instantly. What does that mean? Ethan exhaled shakily. It means my mother spent 30 years protecting the Blackwell empire before she ever cared about me. Rain battered the motel roof hard enough to shake the walls while Clara struggled to process the terror buried inside those words. Then headlights suddenly cut across the motel parking lot outside. Bright white beams slicing through the storm. Daniel moved toward the window immediately. 3 black SUVs. Clara's heart nearly stopped. Noah remained completely still beside her, while the engines outside slowly shut off one by one beneath the rain. Doors opened. Dark silhouettes stepped into the storm wearing long black coats. Clara looked down at her shaking hands resting protectively over her stomach. Then she heard the one voice she prayed she would never hear again tonight. Calm. Elegant. Cold enough to freeze the room from outside the motel office door. Clara. Margaret Blackwell called softly through the storm. Open the door. We need to discuss your future. The entire motel seemed to stop breathing after Margaret Blackwell's voice cut through the storm outside. Clara sat frozen beside the fireplace with both hands over her stomach while rain hammered against the windows hard enough to blur the black SUVs waiting beyond the parking lot. Daniel stepped instinctively toward the door, uncertain whether to block it or open it. Noah remained completely still beside the reception desk, one hand resting lightly against the old wooden counter, as though he had all the time in the world. That calm terrified Clara more than panic would have. Her phone still pressed against her ear crackled softly before Ethan spoke again, lower now. Defeated somehow. Do not let her take you anywhere. Clara swallowed hard. Ethan, what is happening? But another voice interrupted from outside before he could answer. Clara. Margaret again. Smooth. Elegant. Patient. This storm is getting worse. You should not be in a roadside motel in your condition. Lightning flashed white across the windows, illuminating her silhouette standing beneath a black umbrella in a perfectly tailored coat untouched by rain. Even from inside the motel, Margaret Blackwell looked exactly like the kind of woman who never lost control of any room she entered. Clara remembered the first time they met 3 years ago at a charity gala in Manhattan. Margaret smiled politely while evaluating her like an investment portfolio. Pretty enough. Educated enough. But never powerful enough for the Blackwell name. Clara understood that now. Finally. Noah crossed toward the front door slowly and locked it with a quiet metallic click. Margaret noticed immediately through the glass. Mr. Hayes? She called calmly. I was wondering how long it would take before you involved yourself. Noah leaned one shoulder casually against the doorframe. Interesting night for a family reunion, Margaret. Clara's eyes widened slightly. They knew each other personally. Of course they did. People at that level always did. Wealth moved in circles smaller than countries. Margaret gave a faint smile from beneath her umbrella. Still holding grudges after all these years? Noah's expression never changed. Still destroying lives to protect stock prices? The air inside the motel tightened instantly. Daniel looked between them nervously while Clara's heartbeat pounded harder with every second. Another contraction rolled through her stomach, sharper now. She inhaled quickly through the pain. Noah noticed immediately and crossed toward her without hesitation. Margaret saw it too through the window. Her expression cooled slightly. "Clara," she said softly through the glass, "you do not belong here." Clara almost laughed at the absurdity of hearing that sentence tonight. She no longer belonged anywhere. Noah crouched beside Clara carefully while she fought through the tightening pain. "Breathe slowly." His voice remained steady enough to anchor her for one dangerous second. Outside, Margaret lowered her umbrella slightly and looked directly at Clara through the rain-streaked glass. "Ethan made emotional decisions tonight. Understandable under pressure. But emotions pass. Consequences remain." Clara stared back at her future mother-in-law and finally saw the truth clearly. Margaret Blackwell did not hate her personally. That would have required emotion. Clara was simply an obstacle. A loose thread threatening billion-dollar agreements and carefully arranged futures. "You ruined my wedding," Clara whispered shakily. Margaret's expression barely moved. "No, Clara. I prevented a financial collapse that would have destroyed thousands of employees and investors." The coldness of that answer settled into the motel like smoke. Noah stood slowly beside Clara now, broad shoulders blocking part of the doorway. "Amazing," he said quietly. "You still talk about human beings like accounting problems." Margaret's eyes shifted toward him. "And you still pretend morality matters in business." Noah gave the faintest smile. "It matters when innocent people become collateral damage." Silence stretched dangerously between them while thunder rolled overhead again. Then another SUV pulled into the parking lot fast enough to spray water across the pavement. Clara's breath caught instantly when Ethan stepped out into the storm. No umbrella. No security detail beside him. Just soaked black dress clothes and exhaustion carved into his face beneath flashing motel lights. He looked nothing like the untouchable billionaire from magazine covers anymore. He looked like a man watching his entire life collapse in real time. Margaret turned sharply toward her son. "What are you doing here?" Ethan ignored her completely and walked straight toward the motel doors through pouring rain until he stood only feet from Clara on the opposite side of the glass. For one painful second neither of them spoke. Clara had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways since the cathedral. Anger. Screaming. Tears. Instead she only felt tired. Ethan's eyes dropped instinctively toward her stomach when another contraction tightened visibly across her body. Panic flashed across his face immediately. Real panic. "She needs a hospital," he said sharply. Noah answered before Clara could. "Roads are flooding." Ethan looked toward him then for the first time all night. The tension between them felt old. Heavy. Like unfinished war carried silently for years. Margaret stepped forward beneath the rain again. "Ethan, enough. The merger is already signed." Ethan finally turned toward his mother. "I do not care anymore." Even the storm seemed quieter after that sentence. Margaret stared at him in disbelief. "You are willing to destroy everything your father built?" Ethan laughed once under his breath. "Broken. Hollow. You already destroyed it." Clara watched the two of them standing in the rain outside the motel while something inside her shifted permanently. For years she believed power looked like wealth and penthouses and magazine covers. But now the richest family she had ever known stood shattered in a motel parking lot because none of them understood how to protect the one thing that actually mattered. Another sharp contraction hit hard enough that Clara gasped aloud this time. Ethan moved toward the door instantly, but Noah reached her first. Strong, steady hands helping her stay upright, while panic flickered across Ethan's face through the glass. Clara looked up at Noah through blurred vision just as he spoke quietly near her ear. "You are not alone tonight." Then her water broke across the motel floor.